Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. Silence, oh, silence is powerful, and when a woman goes quiet, oh, that shakes a man up more than 100 words ever could. When a woman chooses silence, it speaks louder than anything she could ever say. See, words can get lost in translation. You can talk and talk, cry, explain, beg, plead, and still he might not get it. He might brush it off, defend himself, or play dumb like he doesn't understand what you're trying to say. But when you stop speaking altogether, that silence becomes undeniable. It becomes a presence in the room even when you're not there. It echoes. Silence is not the absence of communication. It's a different kind of message. It's not that she doesn't have anything to say. It's that she's said it all already, over and over again. And when a woman reaches that point, she realizes that words have lost their power. So she switches tactics. She goes quiet, and trust me, that quiet gets loud real fast. A man knows when a woman has gone silent, not because she's indifferent, but because she's done. That's when his mind starts racing. Is she mad? Is she gone? What's going on? That silence. It forces him to feel something he's been avoiding. It forces him to confront what he's ignored. It pushes him into a space where he can't escape the consequences of his behavior. Because when she stops trying to fix things with words, he has to face the broken pieces on his own. Men are wired to notice patterns. They notice the shift. They notice when the usual check-ins stop, when the long conversations at night are replaced with one-word replies, or worse, no reply at all. That silence becomes a mirror reflecting everything he didn't want to see. And the crazy part, she didn't have to yell. She didn't have to throw anything. She didn't have to explain it all for the 100th time. She just stopped talking, and that silence screamed. And let's be real, silence makes a man uncomfortable. It creates a void, and in that void, he starts to realize just how much noise she brought to his life. That noise wasn't annoying. It was love. It was presence. It was care, concern, effort. And now that it's gone, he feels the weight of it. That silence becomes a daily reminder. She's not chasing anymore. She's not arguing. She's not fighting for this. Because a woman only fights for something she believes in. And silence, that means she's saving that fight for herself now. Some men only realize what they had when it's quiet. When there's no more back and forth. When they check their phone and there's nothing new. When the energy they took for granted disappears. That's when they feel the silence like a thunderclap. And no matter how stubborn, how emotionally distant, how prideful he is, he feels it. He may not show it, but he feels it. Because silence leaves no room to hide. It demands attention. It forces reflection. It shakes the foundation. A real man notices your absence. Not just your physical absence, but the absence of your presence, your energy, your effort, your voice. When a woman pulls back, it doesn't take long for a man who truly values her to feel the shift. The silence, the distance, the change in rhythm. It hits different when she's been consistent, loyal, and invested. See, when you've been showing up day after day, holding him down, checking on him, encouraging him, and suddenly that energy disappears, a real man can't ignore that. He feels the void. He notices. Men might not always say it out loud, but they're paying attention in their own way. They might seem distant, distracted, like they're taking you for granted, but when you fall back, when your good morning texts stop coming, when your voice isn't there to soften his day, he feels it. It messes with his flow. A real man, even in silence, is tuned in. He knows something's different. He knows something's missing. And deep down, he knows it's him that caused the shift. That's the difference between a real man and someone who just enjoys the benefits of having you around. A real man values consistency. He doesn't just enjoy what you do. He respects the woman doing it. So when that woman steps away, it's not just an inconvenience to him, it's a wake-up call. He starts thinking about what changed, what he did, what he didn't do, what he said, or what he failed to say. That absence doesn't go unnoticed. It triggers something deeper in a man who actually sees your worth. It's in those quiet moments, when he's alone with his thoughts, that the truth starts talking to him. He remembers how you supported him, how you were there when nobody else was, how your presence gave him peace, direction, motivation. And now, with that gone, the silence is filled with memories. He replays conversations. He rethinks decisions. He wonders if it's too late, and not because he's lonely, but because he misses you, the real you, the one who had his back when he didn't even know he needed it. But here's the thing. Your absence won't affect every man the same way. Only a real man will feel it in his soul. Boys, they'll move on like nothing happened. They'll pretend you never mattered. They'll try to replace your energy with someone new and call it healing. But a real man knows better. He knows that kind of connection doesn't come around every day. He knows effort, consistency, loyalty like yours doesn't grow on trees. And when he loses that, it doesn't just hurt, it haunts. So when you go silent, when you remove yourself, a real man doesn't sit comfortably. He doesn't go about his day like everything's normal. He takes a step back and thinks. He feels it when your voice isn't there to calm him down. He notices when your laughter no longer fills the room. He recognizes that something sacred just went missing. Silence reveals true intentions. When you stop talking, stop explaining, stop chasing, a man's real motives come to the surface. Words can be deceptive. A man can say all the right things, I love you, I'm just busy, I'm trying, but talk is cheap when there's no action to back it up. Silence removes the stage. It strips away the performance. When you go quiet, you're no longer feeding him with chances, with explanations, with reminders of what he should be doing. You're giving him space to show who he really is, without your influence pushing him to be better. When a woman is always reaching out, checking in, forgiving, and hoping, it creates a rhythm that allows a man to hide behind her effort. But when she pulls away and goes still, the truth steps into the light. Because now it's on him, there's no noise to distract him, no emotional appeals to lean on, no one reminding him to care, to show up, to communicate. The silence becomes a test, and how he responds, or doesn't respond, says more than any excuse ever could. A man who never had genuine intentions won't even notice. Or if he does, he'll tell himself you're just being dramatic, or trying to manipulate him, or that you'll be back eventually. He'll justify his lack of action because he was never invested to begin with. Your silence to him isn't a loss, it's a relief. He doesn't have to pretend anymore. He can fall back into his comfort zone, where effort is optional and emotions are avoided. That kind of man reveals himself fast when the spotlight shifts and you're no longer doing all the work. But the man who had real intentions, even if he didn't always show them the right way, will feel that silence in his bones. He'll sit with it. He'll think about why it happened. He'll question himself, not just for a moment, but deeply. And that reflection might hurt, but it will also reveal how much he actually valued you. Not just the things you did, but who you were in his life. When your voice is no longer there to guide him or soothe him, he'll realize how much he leaned on your presence. Silence pulls back the curtain. It separates the ones who only liked your light from the ones who were willing to grow in your shadow. It reveals whether he was there for convenience or connection, whether he appreciated you or just enjoyed the benefits of being with you. You don't have to ask where you stand. You don't have to send a paragraph asking what's going on. You just step back, go silent, and watch what happens. The ones who care will notice. The ones who don't will prove they were never meant to stay. It's not about playing games. It's about giving space for the truth to speak louder than your words ever could. You don't have to beg to be valued. The moment you feel the need to plead for someone to see your worth, is the moment you're already giving too much to someone who's offering too little. Love, respect, and attention aren't things you should have to pull out of someone. If a man truly values you, it will be obvious, not just in what he says, but in how he moves, how he shows up, how he prioritizes you without needing constant reminders. Begging puts you in a position of lack, when in reality you are the prize, and the prize doesn't chase. There's a big difference between expressing your needs and begging for basic treatment. Expressing your needs is healthy communication. But begging, that happens when you've communicated, waited, compromised, adjusted, and still find yourself empty. That's when you start lowering your standards just to keep the peace. That's when you start accepting the bare minimum because you're afraid of losing the little bit you're getting. But what you're really doing is losing yourself, piece by piece, because every time you beg for attention, for clarity, for love, you're telling yourself you're not enough unless someone else approves of you. Real value is felt in your absence, not just your presence. When you have to constantly explain why you deserve loyalty, why you deserve honesty, why you deserve effort, you're dealing with someone who's not ready to give what you've already earned. A woman who knows her worth doesn't chase after confusion. She doesn't try to convince a man to appreciate her. She allows her silence, her standards, and her self-respect to speak for her. Men who truly value a woman don't need reminders of her worth. They might not always say it perfectly, but they show it consistently. They listen, they grow. They make changes not just because she asked, but because they understand that keeping her means becoming better. And when a woman starts begging, she interrupts that process. She starts doing the emotional work for him. She starts parenting instead of partnering. And in doing so, she robs herself of the kind of love that is freely given, not forced. A man can only meet you at the level of his own readiness. And if he isn't ready to value you without you having to constantly fight for it, then your presence will only exhaust you. The moment you stop begging, you take your power back. You remind yourself that your value is not up for debate. It doesn't increase when he finally notices, and it doesn't decrease when he walks away. You don't have to prove yourself worthy to someone who's not even sure if they want to keep you. You simply step back and allow your absence to show him what your presence was worth. Some people only start to appreciate you when you stop giving so much of yourself, when you stop pushing, explaining, and trying to make them see it. That's when the real lesson begins, not just for them, but for you. Your peace is your power. In a world full of noise, demands, and emotional chaos, peace isn't just a luxury, it's survival. When you protect your peace, you protect your clarity, your joy, your strength. Too often, women pour so much of themselves into trying to fix broken situations, mend one-sided relationships, and carry the weight of someone else's emotional immaturity. But at some point, you realize that chaos doesn't deserve a front row seat in your life. The arguments, the confusion, the disrespect, the waiting, the hoping. It all comes at a cost, and the price is your peace. Peace doesn't mean everything's perfect. It means you're no longer willing to settle for what disturbs your spirit. It means choosing silence over shouting, letting go over proving a point, and walking away instead of begging someone to treat you right. That's real strength, because it takes a strong woman to stop explaining herself and simply reclaim her space. When you step into that space of peace, things start to shift. Your mind gets clearer, your heart gets lighter, you stop second, guessing your worth and start protecting it like it matters, because it does. There's a certain kind of power that comes when you no longer react to every little thing, when you don't let every unanswered message or cold shoulder steal your joy, when you stop letting someone else's inconsistency define your value. That's the power of peace. It's quiet, but it's solid. It doesn't need to announce itself. It shows up in your boundaries, in your calm, in your decision to leave rather than lose yourself. That's when people start to notice the change. Not because you're louder, but because you're more centered. Because you've stopped chasing things that don't feel right and started aligning with what actually feeds your soul. Peace is not passive. It's an active choice. Choosing not to respond to disrespect is peace. Choosing not to chase after confusion is peace. Choosing not to engage in drama or play games just to keep someone around, that's power. That's self-respect. When you truly value yourself, peace becomes your standard. You don't entertain people who bring chaos. You don't sacrifice your mental health just to be loved. You realize that love that costs you your peace is too expensive. And the thing about peace, it's attractive. When a woman walks in peace, she radiates confidence. She's not desperate for validation. She's not anxious about where she stands. She knows that if something or someone costs her peace, it's not worth the price. People feel that energy. They either rise to meet it or fall away. Either way, you win. Because you're no longer driven by fear or insecurity. You're driven by a deep commitment to your own well-being. You can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't thrive in a storm that you keep allowing. The moment you protect your peace, you start healing, you start glowing, you start attracting better. Because peace is the space where power lives, and once you taste it, you'll never trade it for temporary attention again. The right man will respond, not react. There's a huge difference between reacting out of ego and responding out of intention. A man who reacts when you go silent might get defensive, might accuse you of playing games, might try to flip the script and make it about you being too sensitive, too distant, or too dramatic. That's a reaction. That's emotion without reflection. That's someone trying to regain control, not restore connection. But the right man, he doesn't panic, he doesn't lash out, and he doesn't try to manipulate the situation. He takes a step back, looks inward, and chooses to respond. Responding means he takes your silence seriously. He respects the space instead of resenting it. He doesn't treat your withdrawal like an attack. He treats it like a signal. A moment for him to check himself, to reevaluate, to grow. That's the difference between a man who just wants to win the argument and a man who wants to win your heart the right way. The one who responds is listening even when you're not speaking. He's paying attention not just to your words, but to the energy behind your silence. See, a lot of men are quick to react because they're not used to being held accountable. They're used to women sticking around no matter how little they give. So when you shift, when you stop reaching out, it rattles them. The wrong man will try to guilt, trip you, shame you, or gaslight you into breaking your silence so he can avoid doing the work. But the right man, he welcomes the silence as a chance to understand what needs to change. He doesn't take your silence as punishment. He sees it as a pause to realign. A man who's serious about you will not let your silence turn into distance without trying to bridge that gap. He may not be perfect, but he'll make the effort to respond with intention. Maybe it's a message that says, I feel like something's off and I want to understand. Maybe it's a conversation where he owns his part instead of denying it. Maybe it's simply giving you space while making it clear he's not walking away. That's a response rooted in maturity, not pride. When a man truly values you, he doesn't let ego drive the interaction. He doesn't need to win or prove he's right. He wants resolution, not control. That kind of man understands that silence is not always about walking away. It's often about needing to feel seen, respected, and heard. And if he really cares, he's going to respond to that silence with clarity, not confusion, with accountability, not avoidance. You'll know it's real not just by what he says, but by how he handles the silence. His actions will speak volumes. He'll show you that he's not just reacting to the loss of your presence. He's responding to the weight of your absence with the seriousness it deserves. Because a man who's truly invested in you understands that communication is more than words, and silence is more than space. It's a moment that reveals everything. Growth begins when the noise ends. As long as there's constant noise, arguing, explaining, defending, chasing, there's no space for reflection. There's no room to think, to feel, to truly evaluate what's going on beneath the surface. That noise, whether it's in the form of constant texting, over-talking, or emotional chaos, becomes a distraction from the real issues. But when the noise stops, when silence sets in, that's when the truth starts to rise. That's when the mind clears and the heart finally has space to breathe. That's when growth begins, not just for you, but for him too, if he chooses it. When a woman stops talking, it's not always about giving up. It's often about giving space. Space to see the situation for what it really is. Space to heal. Space to remember who she is outside of trying to be everything for someone else. And for a man, that silence is his moment to grow up, not just grow distant. If he's paying attention, if he's serious about becoming better, that silence will challenge him to level up, to take accountability, to stop hiding behind comfort and face the discomfort that change demands. People don't grow in comfort. Growth requires disruption, and silence is a powerful disruptor. It shakes up patterns, breaks routines, and forces both people to confront what's really been happening beneath all the noise. For a man who's used to being coddled, used to being pursued, used to getting by with the bare minimum, that silence is the wake-up call. It challenges him to ask questions he's been avoiding. Who am I without her energy propping me up? What have I been doing that pushed her to this point? Do I want to grow, or do I want to stay the same and risk losing her? When there's no more talking, there's no more cover. The silence exposes the cracks in the connection. It reveals whether love was mutual or just one-sided effort. It shows who's willing to do the inner work and who was only in it for the convenience. Growth doesn't come from endless conversations trying to convince someone to change. It comes from the quiet, where the reality becomes impossible to ignore. That quiet moment, that stillness, is where decisions are made, real decisions. Am I going to show up better? Am I going to take this woman seriously? Am I going to heal the parts of me that keep sabotaging good love? Or am I going to let it all slip away because I was too afraid to face myself? That's the kind of self-check that only happens when the noise dies down. And for the woman, the silence gives her time to return to herself, to remember that her voice matters, but it doesn't have to be loud to be powerful, that her value doesn't decrease when she's quiet. In fact, it often increases, because silence demands respect, and in that space of peace and distance, she finds the strength to choose what aligns with her growth, not just her emotions.